Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, partners, and other participants on this call, on behalf of the Strengthening Peace and Resilience in Nigeria program, funded by the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, I am pleased to welcome you to today's webinar on advancing women's rights and access to justice through psychosocial support and trauma-informed peace-building care and approaches. We sincerely appreciate you for joining this webinar. By way of introduction, I am Amina Akanwo-Bello, the Gender Equality, Disability and Social Inclusion Lead for the Spring Program, and I will be moderating today's session. We sincerely appreciate each and every one of you for joining us today, including government stakeholders on this call, our partners, faith leaders, community actors, and of course, I've seen some of our civil society friends in the room. The theme of this webinar is closely linked to the Women, Peace and Security agenda because women's rights cannot be fully realized in conflict-affected settings without addressing the trauma, violence, and exclusion that women and girls face in conflict-affected societies. It's important to mention that women and girls continue to face violence, trauma, stigma, and barriers that make it harder to seek justice and access support. While justice is often discussed in terms of laws, institutions, and systems, we know that for many survivors, healing, safety, trust, and dignity are just as important. These are often the factors that make it possible for women to speak out, seek help, and begin to rebuild their lives. Most importantly, helping survivors of violence to heal, rebuild confidence, and engage safely and meaningfully in social, civic, and peace-building processes is critical. So we promise you that this webinar will facilitate important conversations. And so in terms of objectives of this webinar, the objectives of this webinar are to increase awareness of the role of psychosocial support and trauma-informed care in advancing women's rights and access to justice, highlight how trauma healing can contribute to preventing violence and strengthening peace building, promote dialogue on engaging men and boys in positive and non-violent ways, strengthen the role of civil society, community actors, and faith leaders, and share practical lessons from work at the intersection of psychosocial support, justice, and peace building. Distinguished participants, today's webinar gives us an opportunity to reflect on how psychosocial support and trauma-informed approaches can help strengthen women's rights, improve access to justice, support healing and recovery, and contribute to more peaceful and resilient communities. We are fortunate to have with us experts serving as panelists and highly experienced partners on this call. They bring policy insights, technical expertise, practical experience, and community-level perspectives to this discussion. We are grateful to each of you for being here and for your willingness to share your knowledge with us. Before we move into the main conversation, I would like to warmly acknowledge everyone joining us today. It's our hope that the discussion will not only deepen understanding, but also encourage practical action and stronger collaboration across the different actors working to transform the lives of women and girls in conflict-affected, marginalized, and underserved communities. To formally begin this webinar, it is my pleasure to invite Dr. Okoa Okiwo, the team leader of Spring, to deliver his opening remarks. Over to you, Dr. Okoa. Thank you, and over.
Thank you, Amina, and good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I would like to stand on the protocols that has been established. Let me join Amina on behalf of the Spring Program to welcome you to this webinar that we are organizing in commemoration of the month, International Month of Women. This is one in a series of webinars and physical activities that the program is partnering with different stakeholders to hold, both at the federal level as well as in different states where the spring program has been implementing and supporting initiatives. So we are happy to have this panel that is focusing on advancing women's rights and access to justice through psychosocial support and trauma-informed peace building. As we know, the theme for this year's International Women's Day is rights, justice, and action. And the expectation is that conversations and interactions during this period will really move us beyond resolutions, beyond decisions around how to advance the rights of women, how to enhance access of women to justice, but really into getting stakeholders, both at the governmental level, nationally and globally, regionally and locally, as well as civil society and community actors to actually take action to advance rights of women and access of women to justice. The focus of this discussion is one area that is often overlooked when we're talking about comprehensive support to women, particularly in the context of conflicts. And this is the issue of trauma. This is the issue of, the type of support, psychosocial support that women need in this conflict context. So we are happy to be hosting this webinar, where we hope that through the discussions led by the distinguished panelists, we'll be able to look at the different aspects of this challenge. What exactly is the impact of conflict on psychosocial health of women and other actors, men, young people, and what sort of response mechanisms do we have? How sufficient are these mechanisms? And to what extent are they helping to address this? As we understand from the general peace building literature, unaddressed trauma leads to prolongation of conflicts. It affects recovery, it affects rehabilitation, it affects reintegration. When you have individuals, groups, communities still having to deal with the impact mentally of the experience of violence, directly, indirectly, the impact of violence on their well-being. So we hope that through this interaction, we'll be able to help to raise awareness to these issues and draw attention to what needs to be done. We'll be able to examine the different efforts, both within the Spring Program and other actors so far to address this, and what the gaps are, what the lessons are, and how working collectively we can address gaps and we can ensure that on a sustainable basis that women and other groups have access to psychosocial support and trauma-informed peace building initiatives. And that through this, we'll be able to ensure that these issues become rights as it were, that women and other groups will be able to enjoy. And that this also, recognizing them as rights and working around this, can also eventually enhance the access of women to justice, justice to gender-based violence, justice to access to economic opportunities, and justice even in terms of the sheer loss that women encounter in the context of conflict. So we're really to say welcome. We hope we'll have rewarding conversations. Please feel free. This is a safe space. This is an open space, so we can have frank and candid discussions. From the spring program, we look forward to uh, finding opportunities for continuous program, even in this area of work. And we hope that other actors working in this space would as well gain some 2 or 3 insights that could influence their policy work and their programming work. So once again, thank you for joining us, and let's have a fruitful afternoon. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you very much, Dr. Okwa, for those thoughtful opening remarks and for setting the tone for today's webinar. As mentioned by Dr. Okoa, today's webinar will help us gather different perspectives on an issue that is often treated in parts rather than as a whole. So we will now move into the expert panel conversation, which is the main part of today's program. To reflect more deeply on the focus of today's conversation, I am pleased to introduce our panelists for today's webinar. We have Dr. Victoria Daho. She has a PhD in psychology. She is a seasoned psychologist, trauma counselor, and gender-based violence specialist with over 2 decades of experience in humanitarian response, mental health, and gender programming across Nigeria. She is the Chief Executive Officer of Elohim Development Foundation, where she leads initiatives focused on trauma healing, peace building, and community resilience. Another critical stakeholders we have serving as panelists today is Dr. Maji Peters. He is the country coordinator of Care Frontier Nigeria with over 2 decades of experience in development and humanitarian work. As lead facilitator for the Alternatives to Violence project, he led peace-building initiatives in several states in Nigeria and abroad. He specializes in peace building, social cohesion, trauma consciousness, and resilience, as well as compassionate connection. Another important panelist we have is Her Excellency Ambassador Nkoyo Esutoyo. She is a senior Nigerian public policy and development leader with more than 3 decades of experience spanning economic governance, social protection, gender equality, diplomacy, and large-scale systems reform. She is also the founder and executive director of Gender and Development Action, GADA, one of Nigeria's early gender policy and movements building organizations. Another important panelist you should know is Mr. John Elachi. He is a development practitioner with over a decade of experience driving impact in communities through peace building, humanitarian responses, livelihood empowerment, climate action, trauma and mental health awareness. He is the founder and executive director of Trust Aid and currently the public relations officer for the Civil Society for Cancer Advocacy and Prevention, Kaduna State chapter. Please join me in welcoming this wonderful panelists. Thank you. You are all welcome. To help the conversation flow well, I will begin with one opening question for each panelist in the first round, and then we will deepen the discussion from there. Dr. Victoria, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Let me begin with you. From your experience, how does trauma affect women's ability to fulfill their rights, seek justice, report abuse, and participate fully in family and community life? Over to you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Great to be here. So I'll go straight so we can make good use of time. You see, when women are traumatized, many things happen to them. It doesn't matter what causes the trauma. The important thing is that the woman is traumatized. There's fear, there's shame, there's confusion. Sometimes there's even emotional exhaustion because maybe this what is leading to the trauma has occurred several times before. Now, when women feel like that, when women have gone through trauma, and they feel like that. They feel ashamed of themselves. They feel they are full of fear. They are full of emotional exhaustion. Such women find it very difficult sometimes to even seek justice. They find it very difficult expressing themselves. They find it very difficult narrating the situations that led to their ordeal. They also believe that people will not believe them because we have a culture where we're always we're quick to judge. We judge the victim, and then sometimes because they are confused or they've had to narrate their stories too often without being believed, you find out that trauma affects memory. You begin to find out they begin to forget some of the details of whatever has happened to them. So in narrating their stories, you might find some inconsistencies. What they said to Amina yesterday might not be what they will say to Victoria tomorrow, might not be what they will tell Dr. Okoa next tomorrow. But it's all because of trauma. And it gets to a point that because they cannot be consistent, their story is considered false or people don't believe them. And it begins to look like they're just making up a story. Trauma also leads to silence and withdrawal. We know that we've had several cases where we keep asking a traumatized victim to narrate the story. A woman loses her husband, or yes, and people go to visit her. Every group that comes says how it take happen. By the time she finishes narrating and she leaves, another batch of people come whom she respects, and the question still boils down to how it take happen. You find that the victim has to keep reliving the experiences that she has gone through, and this can lead to a re-traumatization of the person. And trauma for victims is worsened by insecurity and displacement, which is our current reality in Nigeria now. We have women who have been, there's a lot of insecurity around, women have been displaced. Let's look at the trending video that is going on now of a woman in Jos holding on to uh, I think it's the spouse or the son holding on. I've refused to look at the details of the video to help my own mental health. But she's allegedly asking that person to wake up. That's the face of the Nigerian woman right now in terms of insecurity. So you find that kind of woman would live in a state of shock, a state of disbelief, a state of, not trusting. She will not believe in the structures, the governance structures, the people around her. Nigeria has failed her as far as she's concerned. That kind of woman will not want to listen to anything we say. She will withdraw, she will become silent. But on the other hand, she can become so traumatized that she begins to transfer her trauma to the people around her, the children around her. And in some very extreme cases, they can become perpetrators of the same violence of which they were victims, or at least they facilitate, violence, and that would traumatize other people. So when we are talking about women seeking justice and trying to report abuse, we must understand that even our cultural factors do not encourage women speaking out. There's a culture of silence. We don't encourage women speaking out about the kind of abuse they go through, because most times we ask questions that are judgmental. Why did you go there? What did you do? What was your response? How did you trigger the person? All you hear, you must have done something. Or what were you wearing? Why were you there at that time? All those kind of questions. And for the women around, they do not have to wait for it to happen to them. They see what happens to their fellow women, how they are treated when they are traumatized or they've gone through a very troubling situation, how they become from being the survivor, they become the victim, they become the everything, the whole blame comes back to that woman. So I'm hoping our discussions today we look deeply at these things, because whether we like it or not, trauma has a female face in Nigeria particularly, and it's something we need to keep talking about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Victoria. This is a very strong starting point, and it reinforces the fact that trauma may not always be visible, but it can deeply affect confidence, trust, decision-making, and the ability to seek help. And you mentioned that it is important that we address culture of silence for women to be able to speak out and improve their chances of seeking justice. Thank you very much. Ambassador Unkoyo, if you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Great. Building on that conversation or the input of Dr. Victoria, how does psychosocial support fit within the broader women, peace, and security agenda, particularly in relation to protection, participation, and recovery, especially in relation to, participation, protection, and recovery? Thank you.
So thank you very much, Amina, and thank you to everyone for having me on the panel today. I think the conversation is an important one in the sense that the very nature of what we're talking about um, tends to separate conflict and sees conflict only as places where there's been the actual exchange of violence. But if you really look at the Nigerian context, increasingly, a lot of us are carrying different forms of experiences that are traumatizing. And look at what Victoria just talked about, that she didn't want to look at the video because she wanted to respect her and deal with her mental health. The entire Nigerian environment is very much one in which conflict must not be just seen as where the conflict itself is happening, but increasingly in terms of where the conflict itself is impacting upon. So we must think about conflict in a more holistic sense. And therefore, when we come to the question that we're addressing today about the women, peace, and security agenda, we tend to look at this in the context of Resolution 1325, the UN Resolution 25, which talks about how do we deal with the inclusion and getting a comprehensive a solution or a policy environment which recognizes that women are an integral part of the experiences of conflict, and therefore they have to be fully and equally made to participate in that experience and dealing with what they have gone through as women. This agenda in itself has very significant inputs here in Nigeria, and we've done quite a lot of work around them in Nigeria. But that's different in the sense that when you think about that as a programmatic thing, as different from where you are dealing with the pillars of that agenda, which talks about participation, prevention, protection, and reliefs and recovery, you think more in terms of how does this happen in the everyday experience of people and how do you get people to deal with this. And you then begin to see what Dr. Kwa talks about. This is an area which we often deal with in the exception. It becomes an added on and not a mainstream situation. And I think the point we're trying to make today is that we must go beyond just adding this question of psychosocial support, which we hear on the lips of so many people, and begin to see this as a mainstream issue in the wider agenda of women's contribution to peace and security in the country. Let's just take the quick one that happened recently, the Ozoro thing, for example. It may not seem to anybody that that's a conflict environment, but increasingly, if you look beyond that, what happened there was also capable of leading to very serious conflict issues in that community, as it were. And the responses we have and what we are hearing is that the girls who were affected and impacted upon were taken to Asaba, and at a meeting people asked, which of you was raped? Can you imagine that kind of reaction to such a deeply impactful and ugly experience that the women had? So it goes to show that even as a state, even at the level of government, you think about this thing, so okay, conflict is going on somewhere in one community, Borno or somewhere, let's go and take some psychosocial support into that. And if I tell you that our experience with the Ozoro thing is quite revealing, it will only show the extent to which this is a very important part. We started asking ourselves, if the government is treating this thing in denial and saying that some of those stories, actually they use the language, there was no penetration. Even if there was no penetration, what about the trauma all of that caused on the girls that were either assaulted or touched or abused in one form or the other? What about the remedial experiences of the girls that are involved? And so it goes to show, at a point we started talking about maybe we need to take them to a shelter or something like that. And the question arose as to the ability of the shelter itself to deal with all of this. So what I'm trying to say in effect is that we must increasingly think about this as a mainstreaming into our entire work around violence against women. We also need to, women and girls, we also need to take this into the mainstream of our peace building and our security architecture. It mustn't be something we leave on the side and come. I just want to add that there's a lot of legislation around this. We mustn't think that we are coming from a 0 point of engagement. The VAP law, the Child Right Act, there are many laws that provide for some involvement of psychosocial support and trauma-informed care. But increasingly, what we are seeing is that a lot of that is not backed by the expertise you need, it's not backed by the knowledge we need, it's not backed by the information that makes it appropriate for the circumstances in which we find ourselves. And to think that this is a one model fit all can be quite problematic. So we need to look at the many ways in which this is backed, and because the very nature of these experiences are very varied depending on where and the status and the differentials of women's existence, we must begin to think about how do we deal with this. And I want to say, Amina, that this is very complex, particularly when you go into community experiences. And I can give you one quick example, and that will be very short and brief. I'm talking about something which I am increasingly calling child farming. People go into a community where there's a conflict and people are there as IDPs and so on, and basically looking for ways to harvest, sometimes impregnate the girls and use them to harvest. And increasingly there's the selling and marketing of children. So it's becoming a very, and the experiences of the women who are involved in this, because there's also element of criminality involved in all of this. So it's a very dark area, as well as dealing with the perpetrators and dealing with the survivors of these kinds of problems. And how do you explain to the children, the mothers of these babies that have been taken away, what their experiences amount to? So I'm just saying that we must look at this even as gender activists in the light of the complexities. The nature of gender-based violence in itself is very varied and very complex, and it affects different people in different stations of life, and the experiences cannot be unified. You cannot say one person's experience equates to the other experience. And so the traumas that we go through are extremely different dependent on where we find ourselves. So my point is that this is a very important piece of work that needs to happen. We need to come up with how do we mainstream. We talk a lot about this being community-led, in order that the social dimensions of it may be taken on board, as well as the psychological aspects of it. But as a model, it may be greatly. I came across what the government of Uganda has done. They have something in the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, which they call the National Guidelines for Provision of Psychosocial Support for GBV survivors. That gives you at least a template to begin to look at and to deal with the variations that you may be thinking about. But the community components is very, very problematic, because sometimes, like Victoria said, those community interventions could actually result in a re-traumatization of the victims that are the survivors of the gender-based violence and things that have happened within the community. So I want to stop here by saying that what we have on ground in terms of approaches is definitely and very much inadequate. We need to create more awareness. We need to bring in more specialization into the healing process in order not to create a system where the intersection of patriarchy and the attempt at dealing with the silence and all of that does not reinforce some of the values that already exist, values which women's rights organizations have worked over the years. Even in terms of access to justice, we're not finding it easy there, because the judicial system itself is not as open-ended as we would like it to be. And the information on what trauma means in that context, where the blame is not put on the girl itself or the woman himself, is something that we need to think about. So what I'm saying is a new area of work, or maybe not new, and it's a forsaken area of work, but the depth of what needs to happen is both at the personal, the community, and at the national. And I started by saying Nigeria is a country overwhelmed with conflicts of all kinds, and that we shouldn't try to think only in terms of where there is insurgency or there is banditry or there is open confrontation. We must see Nigeria increasingly as a country where these conflicts and the traumas we carry are very much a part of our everyday existence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Your input has really helped to buttress the importance of psychosocial support Really, psychosocial support is an important part of protection, recovery, and meaningful participation. And so rather than, treating these as a separate agenda, you have mentioned that we must recognize that conflict affects women differently. And so it calls for their protection, their meaningful participation, and access to justice and recovery. We heard you loud and clear. We need to be deliberate about mainstreaming psychosocial support in peace building work, creating awareness and advocating for capacity strengthening for institutions responsible for providing relevant services. And you also mentioned that evidence should inform interventions so we don't get trapped in using one size fit all approach because gender-based violence is complex. Thank you very much. Dr. Maji, can you hear me? Moving on to you, we would like you to share your expertise with us. Uh, from a practical field perspective, what are some of the most effective ways to link psychosocial support with legal protection and peace building services for survivors? Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina. I think one thing we must establish is that trauma is individualized. Trauma is personal. So we all experience it differently, and it is being influenced. The impact is being influenced by what is happening to us, what is happening for us, and what is happening in us. So what we do, how we do it, where we do it, how it impacts us, all play a role in how we respond in situations that are traumagenic. And it's very important for us to lay the foundation that trauma is real and trauma is with us. Interestingly, you can be traumatized without actually getting to know it. And that has happened many a times when we engage with people and we're going through approaches to therapeutic counseling, or we're talking about grounding patterns and issues around how to build resilience. Then you hear people saying that, oh, I experienced ABC. Oh, this happened to me. Is it trauma? It's not generalized, but it can be, because it's possible for you to be in that situation and not know it. But trauma itself is not an action, just like everything we do around conflict and SGBV. Majority of the things we do should be looked at as a process. So they should be a web that connects each other. And hitherto, we've looked at the whole idea around peace building, looking at conflict trigger in isolation, thinking if we're able to address those issues, if we're able to work towards identification of perpetrators, inciters, and victims, we have a holistic program that could deal with the challenge. But most of the time when this happens, what we're looking at is the effect of the trauma, of the violence, not the impact. But when we try to assess the impact, it becomes very difficult because it's not something we see. Sometimes those things are not very, very visible. So when we're talking about the whole concept of addressing peace, sexual and gender-based violence, and all of that, it needs to be all-encompassing. The whole component of mental health, the whole issue around support structure, the whole area around trauma literacy and awareness becomes very important. Some of the things that happen around the issue of trauma trigger, post-traumatic stress disorder, and re-traumatization, sometimes it's around people that we engage with who might not know the implication of what they say or what they do. So I think it's very important for us to start looking at how do we widen the scope of our mapping when we're doing activities so that people who are shadow respondents to the implementation are also trauma literate, so that it helps us to have a more broader approaches to dealing with what is affecting us. Because there are times when engaging in acts that we term as not right are individuals' coping strategies for trauma that they are experiencing. And I'll give you an example. When I was working in the Northeast, we've had engagement with victims of perpetrating acts of terror. And they just realized that whenever I don't do it, I don't feel normal. It is a heightened sensational response to the trauma they have experienced because of actions that they have done. And sometimes that happens even in our communities. When someone goes through other challenges, issues of belonging, issues around identity, issues around pressures and all of that. Sometimes what you try to do to cope might not go down well. And most of the time when you don't do it, you realize you are not really grounded. And some of the things that push us into doing some of the things that comes trauma, that leads to the perpetuation of gender-based violence, many of them are ways that we think we can help to cope with the challenges that we're confronted by. So I like the whole conversation of ensuring that we have a trauma-informed approach, even so we're able to ascertain what is going on for someone. Issues around self-affirmation, self-esteem, and the seeking validation in everything that we do can lead to a lot of things. In our gender relationship, in our spousal relationships, there are narcissistic tendencies that people manifest, which is a way of enforcing validation. But if we have a broad-based approach to peace-building engagement, if we have a more trauma-informed approach to peace-building, to countering violent extremism, to transforming violent extremism, we realize that we're having a process that every step we take leads to the achieving of the overall picture. So it's very important for us to realize that trauma is not supposed to be on the sideline. Trauma is supposed to be the center stage when we do engagement, especially around conflict and sexual and gender-based violence. And I'm so excited that these days, the whole idea around mental health is getting the front line. Prior to now, most people don't understand it. People don't accept it. Because the issue around mental health too has a cultural and context-specific dimension. There are places where you go that when you talk about issue of mental health, there is stigma attached to it. So the whole idea of shaming too, now that we're having a more sincere conversation, is making people own up to it. I mean, in some parts of this country, if you have mental health issues, you are afraid to say it because it's going to be tagged to your family lineage. It's easy to see someone want to go and get married, and they go into family history, and they say, no, you can't marry from this family because madness runs in their family. Why? The great-great-grandfather or an ancestor you never came across, manifested something like that and it stays. So that issue of shaming and stigma has made it difficult for people to engage and own up to issues around mental well-being. So as little as stress triggers that could bring about minor issues around being able to accept feedbacks, being able to source validation because something that we are ashamed to mention because of interpretation that comes with it. So I think it's very important for us to realize that we need to ensure that this conversation takes a very formidable space in our engagement, and for us to realize that trauma-informed, trauma literacy, and trauma awareness is something that we need to keep talking about, not just when we're having program implementation in our everyday life. Because individual self-care is very important, and you need to understand what is happening to you for you to work towards dealing with it. So I think it's very important for us to realize it. We've had people come up to speak about the challenges that they've been going through. And simply because you're able to get to a stage of disclosure, you're able to talk about it, you're able to voice out what is going through you, there's a sense of relief that comes. And whenever there is a relief, there's a release of that emotion. And these ones are precursors to resilience that leads on the platform to achieving healing. So I think that's what I just want to say now about having trauma-informed interventions when we do our work.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maji. We hope to come back to you so you could share insights from the work you have done through Spring program. You mentioned that trauma is individualized. Trauma affects individuals in different ways. You mentioned that trauma is not an action, it's a process. I hope our participants are noting the invaluable insights that our panelists are sharing. You also talked about the fact that practical perspectives, is very useful. And I mean, the perspectives you have shared really reminds us that integrated support requires intentional coordination, strong referral pathways, and trust between service providers and communities. Thank you very much. Now, do we have Mr. John Ilechi on the call? Can you hear me?
Mr. John is having
Because I'm
some
not able
technical
to see him.
difficulties.
I'm not able to see him. Okay, thank you very much, Abayomi, for confirming that. And I'm just going to come back to you, Dr. Victoria, being a civil society actor. Civil society, community actors, and faith leaders, they are often the closest and most trusted voices within many communities, in Nigeria. So I would say, what role can they play in reducing stigma, encouraging help seeking, and supporting healing for survivors of violence in conflict-affected settings?
Okay. When we work as civil society practitioners, we have codes by which we abide. I prefer to call them codes of conduct. There's a way, there's what we call trauma-informed or survival-centered approach towards working with people. The idea is to create a place, to create a sense of safety for the survivor or whoever it is you're working with that has been traumatized or is facing challenges, maintain their dignity, ensure confidentiality, and give them a sense of their personality, being able to make choices. You see, when we are civil society practitioners, most times we are first responders in every case of trauma, conflict. We're usually first responders, and we come to meet, we engage with survivors directly and at the initial point of their traumatization. When we meet with people as civil society, one of the roles is to ensure that we are protecting the dignity of that person. First of all, we're ensuring that the person feels safe. Let me give an example. We carried out some activities under the Spring Project in the past few months, in training 180 women from 9 local governments, about 20 per local government, trying to reach out to them. These are women who have been victims of conflict. These are women who have gone through different forms of trauma in their lifetime, but at the same time, they need to come out to be of that trauma to, express themselves in their communities. And we're trying to give them some form of leadership trainings, teach them about early warning, early response, to get them involved in the security architecture of their communities. But there was one thing that came out clearly. These women had experiences. These women had pains. These women had gone through a lot, but felt that nobody was listening to them. Nobody really cared. They were seen as numbers. They were just counted amongst the numbers. Nobody, like Dr. Maji said, trauma is a personal thing. People go through different stages of trauma, different forms of trauma, and react differently. The way we react to trauma and our coping mechanisms differ across board. So as civil society organizations, it is our responsibility to ensure that we do not re-traumatize, that we create awareness around the issues of trauma, mental health, and all that. And we also teach people, especially our staff, how to engage. Now, for these women we worked with, we realized that some of them, for the very first time, were able to open up and say their challenges, say what they had been going through. Why? They felt safe. Because we carried out a research first, a rapid assessment, trying to find out how safe they felt in their communities. And most of them said they did not feel safe. And for some of them, they were still going through some form of guilt over their losses. So you can imagine a survivor still having survival guilt. Why did I survive when my family died? So that is on another level from the person who doesn't have survival guilt, but just feels that they are victims and all this has affected them one way or the other. So as civil society organizations, it's our job to prioritize the safety of these people, their dignity. And in doing that, we must create a safe environment, an environment where they can be talked to respectfully. We must listen without judgment. Very key, listening without judgment, making sure that the survivor understands that we actually care and we're not just asking because we're carrying out a research. You know, a lot of times when we approach people, whether we're working with community members or something, they know that you are coming to get information, but you have to make them understand that you actually care about them. And it shows in the way we engage with them, whether we're actually listening to them or we're just taking notes and gathering our information to go. And that can make them shut up and close up and not give you information. And another thing is to believe the person you are talking to, believe this survivor first. Believe them. Don't talk to them suspiciously. Don't talk to them in a way that make as if you're interrogating them. You are a police officer asking, then what happened? Where did you go to after that? But you said the last time that. Just allow them tell you their story in a non-judgmental environment. And we must make sure our language is respectful as we engage. Talk to them respectfully. That they're in that state does not make them any less human. We must ensure confidentiality. You see, on this project, the project I'm talking about, while we're working with these women, one of the things we tried to do, even though they were all women in the hall, we still gave an opportunity for women to approach the psychologists privately for sessions that they could not, to discuss issues they could not say in public. And we also ensured that we did not take, when you take pictures, maybe you have to report that you actually carried out some work. There's a way to go about taking those pictures. You take them from the back, you try to blur the faces of the person and all that. And then when we report, you don't report actual names and locations, because that can be traced, except you have the consent of the person the participant or the survivor you're engaging with. If you have their consent, informed consent, please, not just consent, informed consent. Those are two different things. Consent is, I want to take your picture. Yes, you can take it. Informed consent is, I am taking this picture. It might appear here and here and here. We might use it for this, and this, and it will go further than this, your community. And it might lead to people knowing about your story. That is, if the person hears that and is still willing, that is informed consent. And most times it is better to get that informed consent either documented by voice or, if possible, put it down in writing. I want to also point out that we need to be very patient and avoid being emotional. I've also realized that, okay, Oga Maji is a strong exception, but a lot of us working in this sector and working on trauma are women. And we've been accused of being emotional. I say our emotions are a part of everybody. Even the men have emotions. They just express it differently, right? So the idea is that we must stick to the issue at hand, help the person receive a solution in a dignified environment with confidentiality where they feel safe, and at the same time recognize their cultural sensitivities. Please let me end with that. Cultural sensitivities are very important. The way you would deal with a survivor in Kanu might not be the same way you deal with a survivor in Benue, even though they are all traumatized. The cultural sensitivities coming, the backlash they might get from their communities might differ across board, and this will affect the response or what the survivor wants. And we must respect that. If a survivor says, I don't want this kind of support, we should be able to, after informing them the do's and don'ts, be able to accept and help the survivor come to a point where they feel good about themselves and where they are able to cope with what they have gone through. So as civil society, our work is very broad, and it goes far beyond what we write on paper to submit. It is the soul of the work, and we must do it with all clarity and with survivors at the center of it. We must look out for them. Thank you. Amina, you're muted. You're muted, Amina.
Thank you very much, Dr. Victoria. I
Right.
know you can go
Thank
on
you,
and
sis.
on. Thank you for sharing those useful tips on how to better ensure survivor-centered approach and guarantee respect and dignity for all survivors. You see, that community lens is especially important because for many survivors, the first point of contact is often a trusted person or structure within the community rather than a formal institution. So thank you. I'm sure we have learned, our audience, our participants have learned a lot from that. So Mr. John Ilechi, I can see that you have joined us. Can you confirm if you can hear me?
Yes, good
Thank
evening.
you
I can
very
hear.
much. Thank you for joining us. Sorry about the technical difficulties that you have faced. Are you ready to respond to my question? So when we talk
Yes,
about when we talk about trauma-informed care, it can sometimes, sound technical. So in practical terms, how can trauma-informed approach support survivors of violence to fully recover in conflict-affected settings? Dr. Victoria has spoken a lot about efforts that have been made to promote survivor-centered approach. So we'd like to hear from you. How can trauma-informed approach support survivors to fully recover from violence or from their traumatic experience? Thank you.
okay, good afternoon. Thank you very much. We cannot separate trauma from violence. It doesn't happen without one form of violence or the other, either by banditry, domestic violence, and all that. So one thing we can do to actually help us, to heal is to create awareness. Because one of the challenges they face is stigmatization and also lack of support. And that could be as a result of low level of awareness in the community, because some persons don't know about trauma actually. I've had a conversation with someone some time ago, and what he defined trauma to be, or what he sees trauma to be for someone who has been raped, is actually the pain of penetration. Sorry to use that, the pain of penetration. And that as soon as that pain is gone, the trauma is gone. So if we have people like that in a society who do not understand how someone feels after traumatic event, it's going to be difficult to support them. And if they are not supported, if they are not, there is a tendency that they will also become perpetrators in the future if the incident, the trauma is not dealt with. So I think we need to create more awareness and also train community stakeholders, the community actors, faith leaders, civil society organizations are doing a lot already. But I think we can do more if we engage these community actors, because the victims are close to them. They know them, they live in the same community. But again, if they don't understand what trauma is and they don't have training to support these victims, they won't be able to, and they continue to live like that until it degenerates to another thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all our panelists for those open reflections. We will now go a little deeper into the discussion. Your Excellency, Ambassador Nkoyo, can you still hear me? In what ways can trauma healing contribute to not only recovery, but also to preventing violence against women and girls and strengthening sustainable peace building?
So thank you, Amina. And Amina, let me take a step back and have a little, maybe I should just say this is like a little bit of a controversy itself. People are asking the question, should we be spending more time on prevention and less on survival-focused responses? I know we are likely to say it's neither one or the other, but we need to think about both in terms of a more comprehensive approach to dealing with gender-based violence and the issues around peace building. But there's also the argument that the time you spend on dealing with each of these traumatized cases is exponentially much more demanding on the social actors in the communities than it is in dealing with the prevention question. And therefore, in terms of value for your money, if we can talk about this in terms of money, but in terms of the effort and the energies that are put into it, maybe there should be more attention to prevention. And I'm happy that this question is about how one actually leads to the other. And it's a very important conversation because one of our very powerful donors has had that conversation very recently and is asking the question whether we should be more concerned about the changes in social norm. And that takes me there. Because you see, when you live in a society where violence has been normalized, so when you now normalize it in the way it has become, and I give you a typical example. Last month we were dealing, this month actually, with a case of a community in Cross River State where a man, neighbor to a grandmother, the grandmother was his tenant, had two little girls living with her rather. She lured them to his house and raped both at different times. When he was raping the second time, that other one screamed and the people came out and saw him actually doing it. And he was said to have told people in the community, I'll go and pay the fines and I will be released. And that would have been the normal way all of this was happening, forgetting the trauma of the mother of the two girls, forgetting the experiences of the two girls and all that needed to happen in order to deal with that problem. Now, where are we going with this conversation? We are going to this conversation that when the people that we are creating awareness for themselves live in a state of normalization of violence and acceptability of violence, then the crisis that we are dealing with is very, very complex. Yeah. And look, it's not about Cross River. It's almost in every place you go to. What can we do? They have done that. So let us see how we can help her. Maybe we should take to hospital. It ends at those minimal levels. Then the traumas that live thereafter. And I have come across them. I have met a lawyer that has said years after she was traumatized, she was raped as a girl, she took it on, and when she went even to the law school, her drink was drunk and she was raped again. She said she didn't know until she got home and found out that she had been raped again. And now she's married and she's living in crisis. We are dealing with traumas that can also last generationally. But I guess the conversation we're having right now is that how do we deal with this and still think about prevention? And so some of the thoughts I have is that we have to start by trying to reduce some of these harmful things that are going on in the community that we think is normal. If we don't question those things that exist and accepted by the community as normal. So this is the question, Amina. Gender norms have got to change. The question of gender inequality has to be faced on its head. And this conversation is not about men alone, it's about women, because it's in the context of women, peace and security. So, and the communities where women experience a disproportionate impact of this on them. So we first of all have to deal with those harmful things that exist there that we accept, and the growing normalization of those things and making them look like they're outside. Now it has been complicated by drugs, it has been complicated by social media. Only 2 days ago, a girl told me her nude photographs was being used to blackmail her, and also so how it got there, I don't know. Okay, then there's the restoration of the agency of the people who are survivors themselves. What do we do about getting the survivors back on track so that the survivors become the champions of their issues? Their voices begin to count such that they become the people who then report the cases and follow through. Except the problem again is that reporting is one thing, going to the point of saying, and a lot more reporting is happening, that the follow through is the problem, because you have that access to justice systems that we have narrowed into the police, the prosecutory systems that depend on the criminal laws of our country, the VAT laws that still bring the police into this. In this community of these two girls, police collected money and released the guy who was not supposed to have been bailed at all, given that rape is not a bailable crime. But this is what goes on in many communities. And the girls' parents are so poor, they said, Mommy, what can we do? We took it up to the point of the Ministry of Justice. And that case is still not yet at the level of the courts. So this tells you how problematic even justice, which is one of the ways in which you can now turn around and deal with prevention, begins to impact. The other thing is improving relationships. How do you improve relationships between community families? I give that example again. How do you help that family? How do you turn those families that have been impacted like was said here, a lot of them worry about the stigma, and they are going into silence is actually a response to the stigma and the problems. And they say it all the time, Mommy, let's leave this thing. It's not a time for us to speak about these things openly. You know, it will be a problem. So we need to strengthen efforts at sustainable peace, but in the context where the issues of the justices, the things that have to do with the rights of these people have to be impacted upon. Lastly, let me say that we must deal with enabling inclusive participation. As you know, in Nigeria, participation still remains an awful part of the work that needs to be done, and that has not been done in the serious sense of how do we build for participation. So in all said and done, we have to create peace, not just for the purpose of what we want to see, but we have to create peace in such a way that justice and the well-being of the women themselves that constitute a major part of those communities are covered in the work that we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I mean, you've made very important points. Yeah, healing is not only about recovery after harm. It is also, I mean, it also has implications for prevention, resilience, and long-term peace. You said so many things. Because of time, I won't be able to summarize, the key points that you have made. Distinguished participants, please share your questions and comments in the chat box. We hope that we will give you time to also, present your questions and also make comments after the panelists have finished their presentations. So as we move into the final part of the panel conversation, I would like us to focus on practical action and lessons from experience. Can you provide your input in less than 2 minutes? Talking to Dr. Maji again, let me come back to you. How can psychosocial interventions help break cycles of violence and support individuals and communities affected by conflict to become agents of peace? And I would like to ask again, what lessons or good practices have emerged from your work in supporting survivors and communities affected by violence and conflicts? I hope you can take that in 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, okay, let me try to do it in 2 minutes. I think the first thing is building and building that trust, ensure we create a safe space where victims will have the confidence, will have the belief, and will have the trust that if they get to us, something will happen. 2 is being able to create a platform to engage with them where they could make a disclosure, because that disclosure helps them unburden the pressure that they're bottling on the inside. And so we must create a space, a safe space, affinity space, where victims can come in, accessible, safe, secured, and they could talk about what is happening. The principle of confidentiality and respect for the discharge of physical emotion. So we must respect what they say, how they say it, and how they manifest it because of what's happening on the inside. If this happens, it helps. And I'm going to give you a good example. We're working in a local government called Dusema in Katsina State under the Spring Project. And we did our community consultation. When we're engaging, at first it was like all quiet. Majority of the time we have a patriarchal society, so most of the men were talking. Then we broke into support group and we just couldn't stop. Because in the support group, 1, the circle was smaller. 2, they were engaging with people that they feel they could trust. 3, there is a space that is open for only women, and victim support became very important. When the first person spoke, it was like, oh, I'm not alone. There is other person. So we must be able to create that. And that was the whole idea of the listening centers, informal listening centers that we're setting up. And under the Spring Project, we've been able to set up about 77 listening centers across 12 local governments in 4 states. That means people who have been trained as counselors are able to create a safe space where they could trigger disclosure and support grounding, which is very important. And a lot of things have come out of that. We've had people who are school-based counselors who have what they call a trauma-aware club for younger people, because we realize that the whole concept of the trauma is embedded. For our international women, apart from the radio program, we did what we call the Girls' Parliament. And we had girls come in from secondary schools around Kaduna, and you will be amazed at the disclosures that they're making that they've never been able to share with anyone. And the challenge we have about talking about mental health, especially sexual and gender-based violence, when it has to do with physical violence, issues around emotional manipulation, rape, and all of them, many times victims are not allowed to speak without feeling victimized. So young girls cannot speak to their parents, they can't speak to trusted family members because of judgment. They cannot raise the issue in their schools or in public places because of stigma. They cannot say it with their peers because of shaming. So from every perspective, they are locked into the pains of what they have gone through. So it becomes very difficult for them to be able to empty. But when you create spaces, safe spaces, trusted, accessible, safe environment, it is easy for them to come and on this and make disclosures. And we have come to realize that disclosures is one of the strongest ways of ensuring narrative therapy produce results. So we must ensure that we are able to create a space, trust and relationship building, very viable support structure, have a very good support framework that will help them, and work with locals. Because why we think we are recording results, because in 5 months, we've had 562 people walk into the listening centers for counseling, because the listening centers are within their communities, in community sustainable free spaces. And we're working with counselors they could rely on, that community have respect for. So the localization of the services is very important. It's not people from outside that come in every day and do it. I think from our experience, those are the things that have really worked.
Thank
I
you.
hope I've been
Thank you.
able to keep it.
Thank you
to 2
very much,
minutes.
Dr. Maji. Thank you. And I'm going to ask Mr. John Ilechi to come in at this point, building on his input. What can be done to strengthen community-based referral pathways and local support systems for survivors of violence? I'm asking you this question because I know that you work closely with communities. And so we would like to know, how communities can better engage men and boys in positive masculinity, nonviolent coping mechanisms, and also promote shared responsibility for ending violence against women and girls. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. With regards to that, I think we need to redefine masculinity. If the men we have today were once boys, and if you don't give them the right teaching, they are going to grow up, believing that a man is, meant to suppress a woman, even when they get married. So I think there need to be a reorientation, and we can cut them from secondary school, junior secondary schools. Today they are boys, and tomorrow they are going to become parents. And you can agree with me that parenting has become very difficult today, because so many untrained children today are now parents, and you can't give what you don't have. If growing up and you see your father, beating your mom and all that, you're going to grow with that mentality that, okay, it is okay to hit a woman. But when we redefine masculinity to be, respect, to be duty to community and duty to women, I think we'll be able to have that reorientation, and so that they will be able to protect, because if we don't catch them now, it is going to be difficult when they grow up. They say it is easier to bend a stick when it is still fresh than when it is dried. So I think we need to work with the community stakeholders to create more awareness, and then teach these young boys that it is their responsibility to protect every child. And also know that there are other ways of venting our anger, expressing our emotions other than taking the violent way. So I think with that, we'll be able to go a long way in addressing the issue of violence. And again, it is not something that we can solve, working in isolation. We need to bring everybody on board. The boys, even the artisans and those we think do not matter in the community. We need to bring everybody, because there are a lot of things happening in communities that we don't know. And I can tell you that from what we are building on, from what we've gotten from care fronting, after a series of engagements, series of trainings, we're able to come up with a pilot project, in Chukun local government in Kaduna State, where a lot of testimonies, gory things that you never think actually happened, are taking place in the community, because we are not looking at these children these children today, they are exposed to so many things and they learn very fast. And if nothing is done to actually curb that now, it will continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. John, because of time. And before we open the floor for our participants to share their thoughts with us, I would like to ask one final question to all panelists. And I would like to start with Ambassador Nkoyo. What one practical action would you prioritize to strengthen psychosocial support and trauma-informed responses as part of effort to advance women's rights and access to justice? Yeah, we'd really like to hear what can we do to ensure that women's rights, access to justice and psychosocial support are addressed in a more connected and integrated manner. Thank you, and over to you.
Just a quick response is that how are we transforming communities? How are we dealing with gender equality? Because at the bottom of all of this are things that continue to keep women as less privileged than men. And when that question becomes a central part of the conversation, then the rights of women begin to matter. Then the issues that impact on women begin to be important. And then we can begin to think in terms of where we transform the relationship, the power dynamics between men and women. Violence often comes from an unequal power dynamics between the people who are involved, and I think that that's very important. Lastly, is to say that there must be ways of tracking. Beyond the question of listening, sometimes people listen and are listened to, but I think many more people can be tracked if we have the skills to know when people are traumatized and when people are being exposed to harmful experiences, and begin to bring them into our own ecosystem and expose them to the kinds of capabilities we have and the referral systems that exist.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Dr. Victoria, final thoughts, your closing thoughts?
Thank you. I was just thinking of my head. I think that we need to revive our primary healthcare system in Nigeria. We need to ensure that mental health is incorporated into our primary healthcare system. Because in Nigeria, we have one PHC per ward. And if those PHCs were all working and each of them had a unit that could tackle or handle our mental health challenges in the communities, it would go a long way. Also, I think we need to keep sensitizing both men and women. I think we must continue to work with men as allies. A lot of times we train women, give them capacity, but the men they live with don't have any clue about what we're talking about. So these women go back, and then the community people, as their husbands or their spouses, or the people in the community feel we've just gone to open their eye, as they say, just because they don't understand the issues. So I think as we carry out our interventions, the men should also be brought on, but they need capacity building to understand what the issues are. We shouldn't just concentrate on women. And finally, I'd like to say, all of us are traumatized one way or the other. So if you don't take care of yourself, your own mental health, then you're just playing to the gallery. We all need to take care of ourselves, check ourselves, work on ourselves, elevate our coping strategies, because it doesn't look as if it's going to get easier. And that way we won't bleed on the people we're supposed to be taking care of in the communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maji. Final thoughts. Hello, Dr. Maji, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Trauma should be everybody's business. It's not something we should just have to talk about once in a long while. We should keep it in our conversation. And we should realize that trauma manifestation is not a sign of weakness. Our vulnerability is actually a sign of our strength. When I can own up to my vulnerability and talk about the pressures I'm going through, it shows that I'm strong enough to want to seek how to go to recover and how to heal. So it's very important for us to be open, not to judge, for us to be very supportive. And as those of us who are first responders who are working on the front line, let's not pursue our curiosities, and let's always be willing to ask the right questions. One question at a time, it's all it takes. And if we're able to create that space, we never can tell the impact we're making on the life of others. There is nothing more affirming than going to do an engagement in a community, and you travel back to your little home, and somebody sends a message and say, thank you very much for what we had yesterday. It has been very helpful. Or you just get a text message. Somebody is telling you, thank you very much. Last night I could sleep I slept. That means a lot of us are under pressure and we're having sleep disorder. So unless we're able to talk about it and willing to support each other, we're just playing to the gallery. And it's very important for us to prioritize self-care. Self-care is important. We must do it to avoid burnout. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all our distinguished panelists. Those reflections have been rich, practical, and very valuable. Sincere appreciations goes to participants. Thank you for staying tuned. Thank you for your participation so far. And from the various perspectives that you have shared, talking about the panelists, psychosocial support can really play a broader role in shaping healthier relationships and more peaceful communities. Now, we will now open the floor for interactive discussion, questions and answer. Abayomi, can you help us, Yasmin, to read out the questions we have so we can direct to our panelists? Thank you.
So you're welcome. So we have a question from Ringbon, who's asking, does justice for a GBV survivor end at legal sentencing, or is it only achieved once their trauma is addressed? How do we bridge the gap between a courtroom win and emotional healing? Please let me know if I should read it again.
Our panelists who would like to take that question, would you like Abayomi to read out the question again? I would suggest that Ambassador Nkoyo or Dr. Victoria respond to that question. Please read it again.
I got the question.
Okay.
Just a quick one. Vondi is a girl that I'm still following up after 3 years. She had a very violent marriage. She moved out and left her twins, 2 boys, with the husband. We've gone through a couple of things, the civil systems and everything. She's now got a judgment. Before then, she had actually got also the right to speak to her children once every week on phone. The brutalization of what goes on when she calls the children. The husband, 6-year-old, 7-year-old children. Stop it, mommy. We don't want to talk to you. Don't call us again. You're a stupid mother. You're this. This is a woman that has received judgment. She has. And what did the man do next? He now is on appeal, doing everything to frustrate the judgment and further traumatize the woman. Yes, we need to have access to justice. But like the question has been made, this is very far from the problem on ground. What we suspect the man is trying to do is to make sure he keeps the children as long as possible and the mother never gets a chance to get access to them. So the courts are important, but they can also be a big setback for the process of healing for mothers and those affected. So I thought that story tells it best.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you for using storytelling, to respond to that important question. Distinguished participants, the floor is open for you to engage in the conversation. Feel free to raise your hand if you would like to ask a question or make contribution at this point. Thank you very much. Abayomi, you can go ahead and read out the next question. But then I can see that we have Professor Easy hands up. Professor Easy, please take the floor. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear. I can hear you. I can hear you from my hand, Professor Ease.
Yes, my name is Professor Ease. I have worked in 33 states of this country and counting, and also working with my colleagues across Africa and then also in other countries. I've done a lot of work in law enforcement. I've done a lot of work in capacity building for personnel across services. So we are talking about police and the military. I've done a lot of work in care, so sexual harassment, exploitation, and abuse. Also, training of personnel, so training trainers for how armed personnel will conduct themselves in conflict environments. You must realize that this concept of stems from so many things. People have spoken about patriarchy, and there's also the concept of toxic masculinity. Unfortunately, Resilience building is something.
Prof, can you move closer to your device because I'm struggling to hear you clearly.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I think it's better.
I think it's the network. So
Okay.
resilience building is something that is lacking in our community. In every single thing we have spoken about, if somebody spoke about reorientation is very important for the men in the community because when there is a dehumanization of women, they will be seen and treated as objects, and their voices and their cries will be seen as things and irritation that women just do to garner attention. Sometimes the trauma of whatever women go through seen as part of how life should be. It is because of the misogyny we have. We also have gatekeepers of misogyny. So the reorientation is not just only for men, but we also have gatekeepers of misogyny and internalized misogyny. Those people, some people in social media like to call picnics nowadays. They are the female enforcers of a lot of trauma. We need to understand that trauma cuts across. So we can have financial trauma. Because oftentimes when women come back to families to complain about so many things, they will tell them, say, husband beating you, no. Is he feeding your children? Yes. Is he paying out rent? Yes. Or it may be that the man is locking water inside the room. I'm giving a life example now. Or a woman's head is being slammed on the floor. We've had situations where a stepfather was the one molesting um, the stepdaughter, a 6 or 7 year old that was involved in that particular case. And at the end of the day, mother discovered when she was pregnant when she was beating the little girl. Was the trauma directly done to her? No. But was it done to the child? Yes. At the end of the day, the man's family came after her. When we talk about widows, when we talk about the drug epidemic, when we talk about femicide, when we talk about the fact that because I've been tracking the rising cases for some years now, and it's skyrocketing. Even in Ghana recently, a woman was murdered in cold blood along with her children. So even there was a case that involved a whole family in the US, and I think it was 7 or 8 members of his family, and also a Nigerian who happened to be a stranger. So we have an upsurge in violence. We have emotional torture. But at the end of the day, when we talk about trauma, trauma comes from all sorts of angles. So it's not only just in conflict areas or when there's physical abuse, there's financial abuse, there's mental abuse, and so on and so forth. We need to make these women and even the children aware of the fact that they are human beings. But he has to take a lot of undoing of the indoctrination and socialization a lot of girls were receiving or are receiving growing up. That is what makes them to continuously settle and develop Stockholm syndrome and have trauma bonding with even their oppressors and abusers. A lot of women are financially unempowered. So even when they're in situations where they are being molested or their children are being molested or they are going through some form of abuse or the other, some of them cannot leave because they will tell you that they have nowhere to go and they will starve. When we talk about abuse, we have women who are being reproductively abused. In those days, the story was that women are trying to trap men with children. But we literally have women who were forced to resign from their sources of income, give up their businesses, training opportunities, educational opportunities, and even their places of work, they were told to resign. And then in the space of 6 years, the woman has had so many children because that was the man's attempt at ensuring. Because some of them actually, even when the women use some form of protection, the men actively sabotage so that the woman is trapped and she has nowhere to go. Because if she has no source of income and she has so many mouths to feed, at the end of the day, it becomes a problem for the woman to escape from the cause of the trauma. So when we talk about psychosocial support systems, it should include things like family planning, it should include reorientation, it should include law enforcement training, it should include resilience building, it should include stigma prevention and management, it should include advocacy, it should include education and curriculum support, even from our primary to secondary schools. Because when we talk about citizens education, women are also citizens too. But there's a lot of embedded misogyny in our culture and even in our religious practices that then they do the people use as opportunities to even maltreat even female family members that they have. Stakeholders need to also support. But we often give lip service. We are still struggling with representation and leadership in this country of women. And it is believed that women do not know what to do and should only be followers. Sometimes when they become leaders, a lot of them are very, very resourceful and are not able to have enough information and data. That's another thing. We have a scarcity of statistics. adequately back up the wide and vague.
Thank you,
purpose of
Professor Izzy. Thank you very much. I know you have vast experience in this area. Thank you very much for sharing those valuable insights with us. Thank you very much.
Sorry,
Yeah, and Professor Izzy,
sorry, Amina,
feel
before
free
you
to
go on, let me
drop
just quickly
message in
respond
the
to.
chat box. Okay. You want to say something, Dr. Maji?
Yes, I just
Okay,
wanted to say one.
please go
Yes,
ahead.
from the comments we're having,
Please,
let me just look at it.
just a moment, please. Professor
Okay,
Izzy,
with
please
with
feel
the
free
questions
to
we're having,
drop
I just wanted
message
to
in
say
the
that.
chat box if you have more recommendations. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Maji.
I wanted to say something. We don't deal with trauma in a cluster. We should be able to isolate what we're dealing with. And most of the comments people have made, the questions they have raised, it's true that most of the time, financial stability, economic status of a family comes to bear. And they gave an example of a child that was raped. And just when they were in court, the family came and said, we have settled. And the child is saying that what we're doing when we encourage that is we're numbing that dignity can be monetized. And as long as we're numbing people's consciousness around struggle and fight for validation for their dignity that has been violated, then we're not laying a very solid foundation. We had an experience in Jos where a child was raped. And the person went to the station. He came back after a while. I think he paid money and they said they were granted him bail. He went to court and the rest of them. What did we do? We went to FIDA and trust those women. They took it personal. Even when the family came, they said if the mother ever come back to say she wants to withdraw the case, they will sue her differently. They will take her to court as well. So they made her realize. And in Liberia, we had a lot of those issues at that time under Madam Ellen. On the streets of Monrovia, you see billboard saying that rape is not a family issue. So if a child is raped and the family asks the person to numb it and be quiet, in Liberia at that time, they will pick up the family and they will have a case to answer. So we shouldn't normalize it because of economic benefit. So we should realize that human dignity cannot be monetized. And we're talking about rape here. We're talking about issue about shared humanity. We're talking about issues that affect somebody's mental health. Many times those victims are not quiet because they have nothing to say. They are just not being listened to. And it manifests in their later life. So when we have any case around people that say that concerns rape, even when the family say no, we should push up. And sentencing and monetization of benefit is not enough. We must ensure that we work with that victim to come to a place of healing and recovery, or else it's going to be there. And let's not forget that PTSD is real. We don't dictate when it comes. Like I always say, trauma is not lenient and it's not linear. You don't dictate to it how to manifest.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maji, for your intervention. Can we have Mariam Yusuf Hamad, and then I will come to Teresa Otto. If that's okay, I can see you are raising your hand. Please feel free to jump in. You have less than 1 minute to make your input. Participants, please drop your questions in the chat box
Yes.
for our panelists to respond. Thank you. Over to you, Mariam.
Yes, thank you to all our speakers and the moderator, Mrs. Amina, for this insightful session. This is actually my first time coming across an initiative like this, and I'm really glad I joined. And I have a question to ask, and my question is, does your work extend to Northern Nigeria, particularly Kano State? And how can one join your team and contribute or get involved in upcoming events or volunteer opportunities, if there are any? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have noted your question, Miriam. Thank you for joining us. Abayomi, please take note of our question. I'm hoping that the team lead will be able to respond to this in his closing remark. Thank you very much. Over to you, Teresa Otto.
Yes, thank you for having me. I joined through Dr. Victoria. She sent the link. Thank you for the opportunity. I would like to share my experience quickly. I worked in a school. I had this because I'm contributing in line with prevention mechanism. I've had the GBV training before now. So I had an issue with a student came and reported, because I work in a school, a student brought a case of rape through the class rep. The event happened that day and she reported, and I heard it. I jumped on the case. And we actually did the preliminary investigation, like we took the girl to the school clinic, the doctor examined her, took the swab, examined there was bruises and the rest. And even the student, the male student was even invited to the school clinic and his sample of blood was taken. And afterwards, I wanted to follow up the case. And the next when I went to the school clinic to ask, or the asked security unit about the case, and I was just told that the family of the boy, through their lawyer, has written to the school, questioning them why they took the blood sample of their son without their permission. And this is a school clinic that all the students are even. So they used threats, and through their lawyer, the school security unit couldn't prosecute that case beyond. After all the stress we went through to ensure that we did the right thing. So I felt very bad about it. This is me trying to get justice or even try to bring the boy to book. But some other times, the case is beyond our level. And after you have done the necessary due diligence, somebody at the higher level will just sabotage that effort. The effort actually is very discouraging to some of us when we have put in and we after sticking my head to do the necessary event. It's actually, I felt discouraged and I felt pity for the here involved because I don't have the relevant authority. So in such a case, what would I do? Should I go beyond the school and go and report to any GBV center or something? I was just.
Thank you very much, Dr. Victoria. Would like to respond. Thank you for that, asking such an important question. Dr. Victoria, over to you, please.
Yes, I feel bad hearing this, Teresa, because I wish you had brought this to our notice and would have followed through with that. What they did was just to ask a question with their lawyer now. Would have gotten our own lawyer and they will also ask their own questions and we push the case forward. But you see, when people don't know their rights, this is another point. That boy is not a minor to start with. So parents coming to ask those kind of questions in this, we would have gotten our own lawyer. We have FIDA, we're working with FIDA, we're working with a lot of other partners who are willing to give services pro bono, particularly in situations like this. So, Madam Teresa, it's not over, except if you have given up and you feel it's too far behind. But the effects on that girl, aside from the fact that she was raped, did she receive any kind of psychosocial support, trauma healing session or anything? I think we can take it up from here after now, and we'll see what we can do. Hopefully, we can help her to come out of a traumatic situation, and if possible, we'll reinitiate that case. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Victoria. Certainly linking
I'm
that.
sorry, Amina.
Okay, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to say something, Teresa. Sometimes we are worried that should I take it beyond the school? Sometimes we're trying to protect our jobs as well. So if I'm working in a school and the school say no, what should I do? You can whistle blow.
Exactly.
There are plenty of agencies, there are plenty of organizations where you could whistle blow, and your identity is hidden. They have evidences and they will take it from there, not knowing where it is, irrespective of what the school thinks. Because somebody has been violated, we need to be able to stand up for those who we think are quiet. We can't always think because there are other people in authority and they will use the authority to push down people and compel them into submission. So when you feel as a person who is interested in that case and you have pushed it, don't feel defeated, don't feel pushed down. You can whistle blow, you could send details to organizations, agencies, civil society organization, counseling unit, listening centers in your community, or NGOs that are working in that area. FIDA is your friend. Don't ever forget that. Just the same thing with Legal Aid Corps. They will protect your identity and they will take it up from there. And I think we need to start doing that. Let's start whistleblowing.
Thank you very much. We need to acknowledge the challenge of low legal awareness in our communities. So it's important to continue to sensitize communities, create awareness about legal rights, but most importantly, linking survival to appropriate services. We cannot afford to look away. Yeah, thank you very much. Abayo, do we have more questions in the chat box? I can only see one. Are you able to read it out? Thank you.
Yes, we have a question from Victoria. Her question is, should you still go ahead with a rape case if the victim and family are not ready to go ahead with the case?
You cannot. We need their evidence.
you need
Exactly.
their
It
support.
becomes very, very dicey. You go there
It's
and
not nice, Victoria. How do
how,
you go to court? How
Yeah.
do you establish case without?
that's what I'm saying. You cannot take it forward if the family and the victim say they do not want it. What will you do? You need witnesses, you need evidence, and the people that are involved say they don't want to. It becomes very difficult. You can't do that.
So
But
their
I guess,
support is essential. Go ahead, please, Ambassador.
Victoria, what we could do in that case is actually to bring them in for actually being complicit in crime, which is different from establishing the rape itself. Because when you get to the point of rape, penetration and all those conversations will begin to come up, which you cannot do without the evidence of the person involved or the witnesses. But at least you can show that they have blocked the course of justice. The family has done that. So we can take them to court for a different course of action. Because they have denied the prosecution of the cases in question. But just to come back to something else that has been playing around, there is a whole body of knowledge increasingly which we haven't explored. And we started trying to do that in the context of our work in the communities where we're involved. The role of restorative justice. Because when you talk about trauma healing, and you talk about the role of communities in psychosocial support. This one are English too plenty. The role of communities in doing that. There is a place that retributive justice, which is what you are talking about, and restorative justice, which is a different kind of justice, have to play together. And I think that what this begins to suggest to me, and it's work which we are also beginning to explore, is that we must look more at the issue of restorative justice, where, yes, punishment is important. The punishment, like the first question, is not the entire answer. We did a case with FIDA, took a man who had raped his 18 months child, but he had 4 others to court, and we got judgment. He was locked up. The wife came to us after 4 months and said, my husband is bad. But when he was here, we had food to feed the children. Now you've taken him to prison. We don't have food. We don't have anything. How do we continue to live our life? Oh yeah, you people come and take care of us, FIDA and everybody. That's number one. Number two, even though we say FIDA, legal aid, when we go through FIDA, there's also a lot of cost implications, because the legal fees, and not the legal fees to FIDA, but the registration of your papers in court and everything, all those requirements of the court are also cost intensive. And cases do not last 1 year. These cases last 2-3 years. I know that most of our, on the average, they take 18 months to 2-3 years to get judgment. This has a serious toll on those involved. So that's why I'm an advocate and a strong push for restorative justice, and how we begin to use it more applicable in cases like this.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Abayomi, do we have any other question? I'm just looking at the time. We will need to wrap up very soon.
Yes, we have one more question. Let me read it out. An evaluation I conducted for the Mennonite Central Committee, Tier Fund, and Fellowship of Christian Students shows that most family pressures victims of sexual gender-based violence to resolve at family level than the court. How best can we get communities and families to understand the needs to allow legal proceedings to be done than always resolving at home? So how best can we get communities and families to understand that they need to allow legal proceedings to be done and not resolving at home? Over.
Please feel free to respond to that question, Mr. John Ilichi and Dr. Maji. And I think we've touched on so many of those things. We've talked about low legal awareness, the need for sensitization. I think people shy away from reporting because they do not understand their rights, first of all. And there's also the feeling that if I do reports, will I get justice? You know, there's that perception that the outcome will not be positive. And so people say, well, I don't want to waste my time. We've seen body of evidence that have shown that delay in justice delivery is one of the biggest barriers to reporting of issues of violence. But of course, the high cost of accessing justice, or the high cost of justice. So let's hear reflection from our panelists. Who would like to respond to that question? Maybe
Yeah,
in less than 1
you have
minute.
started addressing it. I think you started addressing it. And many times when that happens, it's because we don't know the implication of our actions. We don't know the weight of what we're compelling the victim to go through. I mean, I've had people who will come and say that, it affected me completely. I'm not able to speak up for myself. I lost value in myself because what I think is wrong with me is not what people think I should talk about. So most of the time, we look at the issue of stigma, shaming, family image, and reputation, and we just ask victims to shut up. So I just felt like there is a need for us to realize that in whatever we intend to do, like I always say, in every situation of rape, whatever we intend to do should be in the interest of the victim. It's not what people think, it's not what people say, it's not what people accept. What is it that is in the long-term interest of the victim? So we should never forget our do no harm principle. We must uphold that and we must work towards it. Most of the time when people are compelled to shut up, they're looking at short-term benefit, and sometimes they're looking at protecting the interest of to look at. And many a times because people don't know any differently. They don't have a strong belief in the legal system. They don't think there's anything that will come out of it. Some people say if you say it out, it even affects and impacts on your chances of getting married, because of the context where we're at. So I think creating awareness and realizing that we're all responsible for how our society turns out should be one of the slogans we should use.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maji. And I think in addition, we have to be deliberate about transforming harmful social norms and really stopping the culture of shaming the survivors and shaming the perpetrators. I think this will go a long way to really providing that supportive ecosystem for survivors to be able to speak up, and share their experiences of violence. Yeah, thank you very much. Any other question, Abayo? If there's no any other question, we would need to move on to Ms. Ene Omoha, who is going to present the key takeaways from the conversations that we have had so far. So we can wrap up this meeting in 5 minutes, if possible. And will it take up to 5 minutes for you to present the key recommendations from this meeting? Can I hand over to Ene Abayomi? I cannot see any other question.
Yes, please, you can hand over.
Okay, Ene, over to you, please. Thank you very much.
Okay, good afternoon, good evening again, and thank you so much for the very, very insightful and rich conversations. We do have a couple of takeaways and recommendations from the speakers, and I will just start and go into it straight away. So Dr. Victoria had mentioned something very critical around repeating trauma when we ask questions, without understanding how to ask those questions. So that ensuring that people who work with trauma victims and know how to ask the right questions is very important, and to also ensure to remember that trauma victims have memory loss is a very, very critical and important point, so that when they have inconsistent stories, it's not because they're lying. Sometimes it's because of the memory loss that is associated with their trauma. So trauma digging should be something that civil society understand the context properly to effectively support the victims. And then to address the culture of silence, there's a culture of silence where people are not able to, because of the lack of trust and the community support, they are not able to really open up. So addressing that culture of silence is really strengthening the justice system, and also addressing the stigmatization that victims face. So I'm just going to list just a few of her recommendations, her very valuable recommendations. And one of it is to revitalize the primary health care system so that mental health can be integrated into primary health care, and people can have easy access to to mental health services very close to them, since the primary health care is, very easy within the communities. And also to adopt an informed context ethics, to ensure that photographers, the media, people in media who we work with, know how to take pictures of trauma victims, ensuring that they are not, taking pictures that exposes the victims, because confidentiality is very important. So media is very, very critical in working with trauma victims, ensuring that media, they are conflict sensitive, they are trauma sensitive, and they understand the ecosystem and how to really take the right pictures. Also, victim interrogation needs to be really hammered within the ecosystem to ensure that people, even the people that work with the staff, also understand how to really ask victims questions so they are not reliving their trauma. And then I'm going to move to Ambassador Okoyo, who made very, very critical points. And she raised a very important point on the Nigerian, conflict or violence environment that we have. So we have a traumatized environment because we have multi-dimensional conflict, right? And so this sort of brings our the issues within our environment to be very critical, and so we need to understand it from different perspectives. She also mentioned that she also talked about the stigma of silence and why sometimes people would prefer not to seek justice, and this brings to the point that communities need to there need to be that collaboration between families and communities, so that communities can be like a support system instead of people encouraging silence of victims. So there have to be a lot of work in bringing community into the conversation. And also, so now I'm just going to mention some very key points that was raised. Ambassador Nkoyo mentioned that psychosocial support has to be effectively mainstreamed into the Women, Peace and Security agenda, and also all peace building work holistically. So it shouldn't be at the sideline, but it should be integrated into every pillar of participation, prevention, recovery. Okay, I'm just going to run quickly because of time. All right, so Dr. Maji Peters mentioned, I'm just going to go straight to his recommendation. So he mentioned specifically creating a very strong safe space, where victims can disclose. So a safe space for disclosure, ensuring that victims, it can be online, it can be multiple platforms, and there's already work started in this, but it'd be great to multiply this as well. So ensuring that victims have a sense of safety to report and to disclose their issues, and also have that trust that whatever they disclose will be addressed. So it's not just reporting, but also following action after reporting. And then Mr. John Elachi brought a very fresh perspective from the community angle, and I'm just going to go straight to his recommendations, and also targeting positive masculinity so that the communities really understand, so that we're not just working with one part of the community, but also bringing boys and men to the conversation, so that they can be like a strong support system for women, and redefining masculinity, because this is often realized to be a problem. And then also teaching nonverbal emotional venting, such that people are able to really express themselves and not take to violence, and just ensuring that the whole community ecosystem is integrated into this. So you're not leaving the artisans out, you're not leaving the children out, because it's an ecosystem, and when the ecosystem is strengthened, then you can really provide the support that the victims would need. Yes, so I'm just going to leave it at this. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the very valuable contributions and for the opportunity. Bye.
Thank you very much, Ene Omaha, for presenting such a brilliant, summary of key recommendations from the webinar. Thank you. We really appreciate this. And on behalf of the Spring Program and our partners, GADA, Carefronting, Hello in Development Foundation, I would like to sincerely thank our speakers, panelists, and all participants for joining us today and for contributing to such an important conversation. We are grateful for the insights shared, the questions raised, and of course, the commitment reflected in those conversations that we have had today. We really hope that today's webinar has helped to deepen understanding and strengthen our shared resolve to support or to advance women's rights and improve access to justice. And of course, we hope this has also helped to strengthen our understanding of trauma-informed care, survivor-centered and peace-building focused approaches, in this context of trauma-informed care. We still have the team leader of Spring Program on this call, and so I would like to, formally invite him to present the closing remarks. But before I leave, I will say thank you. I would like to say thank you once again for being part of this conversation, and please share your feedback on today's webinar with us in the chat box. Sir, it's my pleasure to invite you to present the closing remarks. Thank you. And then, sorry, immediately we take the closing remark from Dr. Uko. I would like to take a photograph. So if you could switch on your cameras so we could take a group photograph. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Uko.
Thank you, Amina. I think before I say some of the closing remarks, let me directly respond to the question that Miriam Yusuf raised around potential engagement. Well, we are not in Kano State as we speak, but we are very much keen to learn about what is happening across the country and to draw on expertise in this subject matter as much as possible. So what I would say is that just keep in touch, be part of the network. And yeah, one opportunity or the other might arise for you to participate in our activities. So Kano is not a focal state, but we very much value expertise wherever they are and experiences of what has worked. We also have the opportunity through the partnership engagements we have to refer, if we know what we are doing, to other programs like us that are working in the context of Kano State. So I would just say it will be beneficial for you to remain in touch and remain in our network. On that note, I think this has been a very, very exciting meeting. I've learned quite a lot from the experiences shared, and also equally important for the questions and comments that participants have raised. One area I hope we'll have more opportunity to talk about, and this is not really to underestimate the importance of trauma that are related to sexual and gender-based violence, is really, as a peace-building program, our concern around trauma is beyond, includes, but is also beyond SGBV-related trauma. We are keen to see how this program can make a difference to trauma that arise from the context of conflict itself. People being orphaned, people being widowed, people losing their livelihoods, and as a result of that are really finding it difficult to cope. So that is one area where possibly we would need to have more conversation, recognizing though that this is around International Women's Day and International Women's Month, but we are really keen to see how this program can make a difference in terms of those burdens, those traumatic experiences of losses that individuals and groups encounter in the conflict context, because our understanding is that they affect the prospects for sustainable peace in the long term. Those need to be dealt with. So we really would welcome more conversations and insights and ideas in terms of how this might be addressed from you stakeholders. So it remains for me to restate the appreciation that Amina has ably made to Dr. Victoria Daoud, Dr. Maji Peters, Ambassador Nkoyo Toyo, and Mr. John Elachi. Your insights have been really, really invaluable. And the participants, your questions, your comments, and shared experiences have also very much enriched the process. We look forward to remaining engaged with you. So I think there was a request. Well, I'm sure we have our contact points already, but there was a request to put down your name and your organizations on the chat if that has been done, so that at least others may be able to connect with you. So thank you very much on behalf of the SPING program, and we look forward to working together to advance the rights of women, particularly in this area of assessing psychosocial support and trauma healing in the context of peace building. So thank you very much, and God bless. Just hold on for the photograph that Amina referred to. Abayomi, I think you have to guide us on how best to do this.
All right, please. Hello, everyone. If we can just quickly turn on our camera for a few seconds, I will take a couple of screenshots. Okay, let's just give everyone the opportunity to turn on their cameras. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ivy, can you take the other side?
You.
I think we have a whole lot of people on this other side that we need to take their photograph too.
He did three shots of 3 pages or 4 pages.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.